When I read this book and I thought of these men, I mean, they were great men of all ages, I mean, many ages, but nonetheless, what an extraordinary moment that these people were constructing a whole new society based upon the best that they could think of in terms of classical and early modern thought.
Andrew, the most inspiring thing about them is that they were lifelong learners, and they read so deeply and so widely and so broadly until the end of their days. And the vision of Jefferson and Adams as old men, they fought, they were together in the Revolution, they divide in the most bloody partisan division in all of American history. Then they reconcile. And what do they want to talk about? The latest books they've read. And Jefferson is so open in saying that he's become an Epicurean in old age, and that Adams is so excited when he learns that Pythagoras is supposed to have traveled to the East and read the Hindu Vedas. And then he says, the one thing he wants to know, did Joseph Priestley complete his translation of the Bhagavad Gita before he died? And Jefferson said, good news, he lived. I've got the edition, I can send it to you. And Jefferson's convinced that this will show the connection between the East and Western wisdom traditions, and Adams reduces them all to the hymn of Cleanth, which he says has become the touchstone of his understanding of the divine, which is love God and all his creatures, rejoice in all things. But just the sheer, they're lifelong learners. In addition to being so deeply intellectual, they just want to learn and grow. And I read that, and it inspired me to read more than I've ever read in any sustained way, and to set aside time every day the way they did. I was really inspired by the fact that as old men, Jefferson is setting aside still until the end 4 hours in the morning for his extraordinary correspondence and for deep reading, and so was Adams. It is so empowering, and we are so far from that ideal. But maybe,
and of course, that's Cicero's treatise on old age. Also says that's what you need to do. You need to go full pelt up until the very end. You're still learning, and there's no sense of completion. There's no sense that that Jefferson or Adams are going to go on a Carnival cruise, or that we're gonna chill and sit on our deck chairs looking at the sea for the rest of our lives. They keep thinking.
It's so empowering. It's an argument for the radical act of self-assertion of deep reading. And we did a great conversation about this at the Constitution Center the other night. And I just challenged everyone to be lifelong learners and just to empower ourselves by continuing to read. And it was so exciting that all these older members and friends came up after and said, I want to be a lifelong learner. I'm reading in my retirement. It's so exciting to learn. And suddenly you realize that the ancient wisdom is right, that we do have the capacity within ourselves to engage in learning and living according to reason, which is happiness.
But that requires a level of concentration and composure that the modern world conspires against. I mean, you can think of people in the late 18th century, and there wasn't much to distract them. It was quiet. There wasn't much street lights. They lived in pretty rough conditions compared to today. Yeah, there was gossip, there was letters, there was politics, there was all that stuff that usually goes along, but nothing like the simply sort of dazzling array of distraction that we currently have in front of us.
The takeaway, if there can be one to basically what's the experience of reading all the great self-help books of the ages, the takeaway for me is just to set aside dedicated focus time every morning for deep reading rather than browsing. And just the simple act of I don't, after having engaged in this practice, I don't allow myself to browse in the morning, although of course I'm tempted to every day. And the rule is I've got to read an actual book. And you can just change your life. And now, every morning you just a little bit of deep reading, and it blows my mind that all of the books of the world are online. I remember as a kid, I went with my mom to the Library of Congress, the Thomas Jefferson building. I still think is the most inspiring in D.C. I was so filled with wonder at the thought that all the books in the world were in that building. But now they're on my iPhone. And the fact that I was able to read not only free copies of all the greatest literature of all time, but also the actual books that the founders read with their own marginalia, if I wanted to do that, and read and write the whole thing from my couch. It's just the most extraordinary opportunity in human history. And you think of Adams and Jefferson eagerly yearning for particular copies of books, or Abraham Lincoln having to pay in corn for a book that he ruined because he left it out in the rain. And the fact that it's just waiting there, shimmering for us, if we can only find the self-discipline to read it, is I think inspiring in some ways, because it's not that hard to develop the habit. I'm not going to browse. I'm going to read instead. And once you do that, a whole world opens up to you.